The trans-Himalayan lands of Spiti, Kinnaur and Ladakh are a magical place. The tallest mountains of the world stand guard here. This high-altitude cold desert has a startling variety of landscapes which vary in height from 10,000 feet to over 20,000 feet above sea level. Thoughts of the eternal are never beyond the vision of man here. In this land where everyday life is a challenge, Buddhism arrived very early. The Sani Stupa in Ladakh is believed to have been made by the Emperor Kanishk in the 1st century AD. There is a colossal sculpture of the Maitreya Buddha hewn out of the rock on the ancient route from Srinagar to Leh in Ladakh. It is made in the artistic style of Kashmir of the 8th and 9th centuries. The first great diffusion of Buddhism in the Trans-Himalayas was in the 8th century. Guru Padmasambhava established the religion in the entire mountainous region, from Ladakh in the west to Arunachal Pradesh in the east. The great Guru had studied at the Nalanda University in eastern India. In the 10th century, King Yeshe-o came to the throne of Guge, comprising western Tibet, Ladakh, Spiti and Kinnaur. This was a time when Buddhism had considerably declined in the Trans-Himalayas. What troubled him most was that even the little practice of the religion, which continued, was impure and coloured by local magical rites. In 975 AD, Yeshe-o sent Rinchen Zangpo to Kashmir. This arduous journey to a land which was the centre of Buddhism was to bring back scriptures with the original and pure knowledge of the faith. The mission was also to bring back artists to build, paint and sculpt new temples in Guge. Rinchen Zangpo spent 6 years in Kashmir, completing his own education and guiding his disciples. In the years to come, he became known as the revered Lotsava, or Great Translator. His translations brought to Guge the true knowledge of Buddhism which the king had sought. In the 4th century, in the Buddhist centres of Kashmir, the Yogacara school of thought had developed. It was believed that the most effective method for the attainment of the highest truth was through meditation or yoga. The different aspects of the wisdom of the Buddha were personified as the 5 Buddhas: Akshobhaya, Ratnasambhava, Amitabha, Amogha Siddhi and Verochana. Verochana, who symbolizes the mirror-like wisdom of the Buddha's enlightenment, is the supreme Buddha in the Yoga Tantras. Seated at the center of the universe, all creation stems from him.
It's a misconception that many people think these images of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are the representation of the gods. No. But they are the deities. Deities means one of the aspects of the Chetsikas and Chitta, because it's a consciousness. No. It's a factor of one of the consciousnesses. No. So they are not truly existing. So these images, as Abhayakar Gupta, when he is the great master of the mandala, he is a mandalacharya, he says now the images come from the voidness and goes to the voidness now.
Mandalas, which are seen in Buddhist art from the 5th and 6th centuries, are an integral part of Vajrayana practice. The path to enlightenment is visualized as a movement through various levels of spiritual growth. From the outer spheres towards the illumined center, towards the moment of the realization of the truth that the Buddha represents.
So he has to create it within his mind and then laboriously identify all the parts of his being, physical and mental, with those of the mandala, to realize that ultimately his body is just another mandala, and therefore identical in essence with any other entity which can be represented by a mandala, such as a temple or a territory or the whole universe or Buddhahood. So one progresses upwards.
Rinchen Zangpo had studied scriptures related to mandalas of Virochana during the time he spent in Kashmir. In this period of the second diffusion of Buddhism in the Trans-Himalayas, it was mainly temples devoted to Virochana which were set up. It is believed by the people of the Trans-Himalayan lands that Rinchen Zangpo made 108 monasteries and temples. He had brought 32 artists to Guge from the valley of Kashmir. They were to create the foundations of a lasting tradition of Buddhist art in the Trans-Himalayas. The painters and sculptors from Kashmir brought with them a highly sophisticated form of art, which was deeply rooted in the classic Sanskrit texts of India. In the 10th century, Abhinav Gupta had taken the Indian philosophy of aesthetics to rare heights of development. This was in a climate deeply imbued with the thoughts of Kashmir Shaivism, which saw the beauty of the world around as a reflection of the glory of God. The experience of beauty, the ecstasy of the aesthetic experience, was considered to be akin to the final bliss of salvation itself. The artistic styles which flourished in the valley were born out of the confluence of great cultures. The art of the plains of India by the 5th century had attained a deep and inward look and a quality of sublime introspection. This tradition of art met the rich influences of the vibrant cultures which came to Kashmir along the trade routes from Central Asia, China, and even the Mediterranean. Such was the inheritance of the Kashmiri artists who made the monasteries of Rinchen Zangpo. The masters from Kashmir also trained local artists. There was a marvelous blending of the local idioms with the classic styles coming from Kashmir. In a fertile valley in Spiti is the monastic temple complex of the Thabo village. This is the earliest functioning monastery, which is believed to have been founded by Rinchen Zangpo in 996 AD. Inscriptions at Thabo refer to the kings of the Guge dynasty who patronized the Thabo monastery. In 1042, a major renovation of the monastery was carried out. The sculptures and most of the paintings in the Dukhang, or assembly hall, are believed to be of that period. The assembly hall at Thabo is an architectural Vajradhatu mandala. The deities are placed along the walls, and Mahaverochana is made at the apex of the arrangement. 4 figures of Verochana, seated back to back, symbolize the movement of dharma in all directions from the body of the Buddha. Mahaverochana represents supreme enlightenment. The deities around him emanate from his universal body and represent different aspects of him. As the worshippers or pilgrims enter the room, they become a part of the mandala. The sculptures of the temple are made of clay. Almost life-sized, 37 deities are placed at a height upon the wall without any support from the floor. This is in keeping with descriptions of clay sculpture techniques in Indian texts of the 8th and 12th centuries. They appear to hover in a heavenly space. The figures would all have originally held attributes such as a book or a sword. These are now missing. The facial type, the crown and jewellery, and the other details came to this region through the hands of the Kashmiri artists who made them. A variety of artistic influences can be discerned in the details. Above all, it is the look of gentle benevolence and peace upon the faces of these deities that moves the worshippers. In the Indian tradition of worship, devotees express their adoration through music and dance. They light lamps and make offerings of flower garlands and incense. In the mandala, these offerings are personified as goddesses. The goddess Vajralasya symbolizes the grace of love. Vajranritya symbolizes the offering of dance, and Vajradhupa symbolizes the offering of incense. In the cellar, behind the 4-bodied Verochana, is made a Buddha. He is flanked by bodhisattvas on either side. Protective deities are placed on the entrance wall. They do not let the confusion of the material world disturb us inside. Not very far from Thabo, the village of Lalung preserves 2 early buildings. The smaller one is a shelter for an impressive sculpture of 4 Verochanas sitting back to back. The Ser Khang, or Golden Temple at Lalung, is one of the most beautiful creations of the entire Trans-Himalayas. The walls have been transformed into a heavenly realm, peopled with gentle bodhisattvas and goddesses. These deities are arranged around a figure of the Shakyamuni Buddha. It is a world of serenity, yet one which elates the worshipper, as he looks upon intertwining creepers and numberless mythical beings which populate the spaces between the deities. Also seen is the continuous vine of the creative blossoming of the world, from which issue numberless forms. This has been a feature in Indian art since the 2nd century BC, in the Vedika reliefs of the Bharati Stupa. Indra is depicted below the Shakyamuni Buddha, worshipping him. His gentle expression and graceful posture make this one of the masterpieces of the Serkhang sculptures. On the left wall of the temple is a sculptural mandala of Verochana as the Dharma Dhatu Vajishvara Manjushri. Here he represents wisdom. In Kinnaur, which adjoins the Spiti Valley, is a 10th century carved stone stele. It has an inscription of King Yeshe O, which speaks of the time of the second diffusion, when it says, "The religion of God and man was taken to its peak." An original wooden pillar capital survives in the Lotsava Lakhang in Shalkar village in Kinnaur. It is carved clearly in the Kashmiri style. The Nako village at about 13,000 feet altitude in Kinnaur has an early temple complex. The main temple is called the Lotsava Lakhang, or the Temple of the Great Translator Rinchen Zangpo. The surviving clay sculptures at Nako show close similarities with the other temples of the period in the Trans-Himalayas. The remote temple of Charang in Kinnaur is also believed to have been founded by Rinchen Zangpo. It continues the tradition of fixing statues of deities high upon the walls. The main deity here is Verochana, and the statues upon the walls appear to form an architectural mandala. Located in fertile pockets of the river valleys of Ladakh are the closely associated temple complexes of Alchi, Mangyu and Sumda. All three are believed by the people of Ladakh to have been created by Rinchen Zangpo in one night. The entrance to the Alchi Dukhang, or assembly hall, is a fine example of detailed wood carving in the Kashmiri style. The shrine of the Dukhang has fine clay figures with Verochana at the center. These graceful forms elevate us through our response to their beauty and joyousness. The entrance to the Sumstek, or three-storied temple, is delicately carved in the Kashmiri style. Figures are framed in architectural forms, as seen in the temples of Kashmir since the 8th century. A special feature of the temples of Ladakh of this period are colossal figures of bodhisattvas. These are made of the local mud and stand 2 stories high. The exquisite paintings of the Sumstek were made by Kashmiri painters. They are the only surviving visual record of the culture of the Kashmir Valley at that time. The art of the temple complex of Mangyu is very similar to that of Alchi. The tradition of Brihad or colossal Buddhas is continued here, in the Bodhisattva statues which are over 12 feet high. A stupa at Mangyu has the most beautiful interior of any in the Trans-Himalayan region. There are fine statues and paintings here of the period of the second diffusion. The monastery of Sumda, at about 13,000 feet altitude, is the third temple complex which is supposed to have been built in the same night as Alchi and Mangyu. What makes Sumda remarkable is the almost entirely preserved Vajradhatu mandala made out of clay. 37 figures create an ordered universe. Flying figures bear offerings for the deities who represent our inner qualities. There is a joy which pervades this world of purity and graceful form. This experience of joy lies at the heart of the Buddhism which came during the second diffusion. In the vast and bleak desert lands of the Trans-Himalayas, the temples of the second diffusion of Buddhism are like an oasis of color. The architecture, the sculpture, and the paintings are all a part of a unified, sacred plan. Their purpose is to move us and to transport us far from the cares and confusions of the material world, to the depth of the peace to be found within.